Welcome to Leaving Nothing to Chance, your go-to podcast where we bring you insights from some of the most influential voices in small business and personal development. Each week, we dive deep into conversations with top thought leaders, authors, and business moguls from around the world, sharing their secrets to success and strategies for growth. Tune in for exclusive content that will inspire, motivate, and equip you to take your journey to the next level. This is Leaving Nothing to Chance.
Hello, everybody. This is going to be a lot of fun. One of my heroes, somebody who's been vegan for a long time, which I've been since January of 2024. Some of you guys know, my health history. I'm a vegetarian for now 8 years, vegan for the last, whatever it's been now, 19 months, 20 months. And I believe it's a game changer. I think it probably will prolong my life. I'll find that out ultimately. But anyway, somebody who's been doing this for a long time, extremely knowledgeable. And when I say she's one of my heroes, along with people like Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Colin Campbell, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, going back in time, people like Jack LaLanne, Jay Cordage, people who thought a little bit different about how to take care of their health. And Kathleen Gage fits that. Kathleen has a program, Plant-Based Eating for Health, that's been a podcast for a number of years. I've been a guest on there, as a matter of fact. And Kathleen, how are you? I can go on and on about you, but let's say hello.
Keep going. I love it, John. I am doing great. And I have to say, I love that you said I'm a longtime vegan because I still consider myself a baby vegan. I went vegan in 2018 and it was for health reasons and didn't call myself vegan at the time. But I know people that have been vegan 40, 50, 60, 70 years. I know some of the top docs that I look at them and it's, oh my gosh, they're the luminaries. But I really appreciate that you said it's been for a long time, but I still call myself a baby vegan. I think until I get to 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to be, some people think it's a phase you're going through, but thanks for that intro.
I've had that too. You'll get back to eating meat, not in this lifetime. So tell us about your journey with inflammation and what kind of led you here. You've been a bodybuilder in the past, you've been a weightlifter, you've been a very athletic person. What happened?
Yes. In my 20s, I was a very heavy drinker and drug user, and I got into recovery in my early 30s. And first, I stopped alcohol at 29, and then I quit drugs at about 33. So that we're going well over 43 years since I've had a drink and 40 some odd years since I've had drugs. And I had to look at the two and say, okay, one is just as bad as the other, but that was my past. And then when I got into recovery, I started really getting into health and fitness and started bodybuilding. Well, being the addictive personality I am, I went completely into it. And going from not working out at all to working out 3, 4, 5 hours a day, just crazy about it. And I was going to compete, and I had a trainer who wanted me to go on steroids. He was a Mr. America placeholder, and he thought that the best way for me to have advances quickly was to get on the juice, which, that is true short term. And I said, I'm in recovery. I can't do it. And we went our separate ways. He goes, then I can't train you. And he goes, you'll never win. You'll be a loser. And it's, oh, okay. So that was the start of my health journey. And as I've gone through the last 35 odd years, I have gotten further and further into health and fitness. At the age of 61, I did my first marathon. And again, like my personality is, I went from never having run before to signing up for a marathon. It's okay, I paid the money, I better do it. Came in last. My claim to fame with a lot of races I've been in, I always come in last, but I finish. And then it was about nearly 7 years ago, I was dealing with a lot of inflammation. My parents had both passed away. I was doing a lot of comfort eating, and like you, I'd gained a lot of weight. And I resigned myself to the fact that, oh, that must be the way it is. Going from a very in shape bodybuilder to where, like, literally I was traveling at the time and I would have flight attendants who would go, oh my gosh, you're in such great shape. Look at your arms and this is amazing, yada, yada, yada. And so ego was in there. And then when my folks died, I did so much comfort eating and gained a lot of weight, felt very sluggish. And I was starting to buy into the whole mindset of as you age as a woman, you become frumpy, you become lackluster, yada. And one day I was like, enough is enough. I just don't want to be like this. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to feel like this. So I started doing some research and came across Dr. Joel Fuhrman's book, Eat to Live. Got the book. started just binge watching YouTube videos from him, from Esselstyn, from Campbell, from all the big luminaries in the community. And they basically said, if you get rid of all meat and dairy, you're going to feel better. So I thought, okay, I'll give it 7 days. If in 7 days I do not feel better, I'm going to go back to eating meat. 7 days later, I dropped 5 pounds without trying because I gave up on diets. I'd been a yo-yo dieter all my life and gave up on diets, and I was feeling great. The inflammation was gone. I had more energy. I was sleeping better. So I thought, okay, 7 more days, I'll do it. So 7 more days, lost some more weight, felt better. And I'm like, there must be something to this. So I kept going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and came to find out what was going on with factory farms, the environment, and really got an education, a good education in a very short period of time. Signed up for the Cornell University certification program in plant-based eating or plant-based nutrition, got certified in that. And then it was about 6 months into it. By this point, I had a lot of knowledge about factory farming, and I'm at the grocery store and I'm walking by the meat department, going on to the produce department, and I literally stopped in my tracks. I felt all this pain and suffering, and it was like, wow. And it was almost a spiritual experience where I just felt the pain and suffering of all the animals I had eaten. And at that moment, I was like, I'm a vegan. And once I crossed that invisible line, there was no going back. So in a nutshell, that's my story. And since that time, I've had some interesting experiences of not calling myself plant-based, just calling myself vegan and eating a bunch of junk food, the vegan junk food. And now I'm back on the straight and narrow. And what I love about doing my podcast is I interview a lot of plant-based experts. And it's like when they share how easy it is, it's, oh, now I'm feeling guilty. But I'm back on the straight and narrow. I am a plant-based vegan. I'm into animal rescue. I'm concerned about the animals. I'm concerned about the environment. And I'm living probably my healthiest life ever. And this morning I went on a 3-mile walk with my dogs. I go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week. I go hiking. I bike. I'm very active for a woman in her 70s. There you go. That's my life story. That's it. We're done.
Yeah, you certainly don't look in your 70s. That is for,
thank you. Thank you.
Sure. And then look, you can almost, I hate to say this, but you can almost look at somebody and know what they eat.
Recently, I was sharing with you before we started this conversation that I went to the county fair because one of the events coordinators there invited us to go, and she said, I'll get you in for free. I'll give you a ride around on the little golf cart. And it was like, okay. And I was shocked at how many unhealthy people were there, but that's the environment. A lot of junk food. And there was one person in particular that was working security that I thought, you're going to have your legs cut off. Before long, you're going to have, it was just so evident. The legs from the knees down were purple, like that hard skin purple. And I thought, there's a solution. You could turn that around. Yep. And I just sat there and I became sad for this person because it's like, a lot of people don't know what they don't know. They think that there is no solution. And so you can look at a person, yes, and you can pretty much tell what they eat.
You mentioned Cornell, and somebody I got great respect for, and I know you do too, of course, is T. Colin Campbell. And you look at his journey, where he was really given study something that was animal based, and then he came to all these realizations and wind up writing, after the Bible, I think the second most published book in history is the China Study, or it was at one time, and become the other Bible for most. Right. And that we go, yeah, let me look at what he said in his book. But love your comments or thoughts on that Cornell program, because I have not taken it, but I know every time I get it, every year they send me it, and every year something else comes up. But what's your recollection of that or suggestions on that?
I would say it's a great program. And one of the things I thought, I've had my business 31 years. I'm a business consultant, and now I work primarily within the vegan and plant-based space. But at the time that I decided to go through the training, I was making some changes in my business, and I was finding it harder and harder to help people grow their businesses that were not aligned with a vegan lifestyle. It's a personal thing, and if other people do it, God bless them. But for me, it just wasn't working. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to become a nutritionist. I know a lot about nutrition. I know about health and fitness. I know about weight training. And so I decided to do it because I wanted the certification to become a nutritionist. And what I came to realize is That's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is marketing and promotions. That's what I love to do, podcasting, writing books, things of that nature. And yet when I went through it, I realized that I had already immersed myself in a great deal of information. So it affirmed what I already knew. But the one thing that really stood out was how much detail there was. It's very robust as far as the information and the research papers. When you read a research paper, let's say milk does a body good, I didn't realize how many of those papers were funded by the very industries that they're promoting. And so that was one of the biggest eye openers. If all of a sudden you see this a series of reports come out and articles come out about how great pork chops are for you, they've discovered pork chops are great. It's probably funded by the pork industry. And then I dug a little bit deeper in that area and found out how much the healthcare industry funds research papers, how much big pharma does, how much the food manufacturers. And then I realized they were all in bed together. So I think if anything, it was a piece to my puzzle. And I would say for anybody who really wants to learn a lot in a very short period of time, it's a great course to take. And if you plan to move into the plant-based space as a nutritionist or an expert within the food area, I think it gives some credibility. Rarely do I even mention it, but I guess it's in my bio, but I don't really talk about it that much, but I do know that it gave me a sense of feeling more of somebody who had the expertise and the credibility, if you will.
Great. And Jack LaLanne used to say, if a man made it, don't eat it. Love your thoughts on that.
I agree. I agree because when you look at the amount of ultra processed foods that are in the grocery store nowadays, and I have to say, sometimes I really wear my heart on my sleeve because I'll go to the grocery store and oftentimes I go after I've been to the gym. So I'm in my workout clothes and I'm pushing my little cart, going to the produce department, getting and then I go to the bulk section, get my beans, legumes, lentils, all of that. And then I look around and I see the reality of what the world is about today. And what really saddens me is when I see young people whose parents, they're not trying to make their kids unhealthy. They just don't know. But I see kids as young as 5, 6, 7 years old that are already morbidly obese and they're struggling to walk around. And I'm like, this is not right. This is not right. A lot of those people get there as a result of ultra processed foods. And I would say that's a good statement that Jack LaLanne made is if it's man-made, don't eat it, because so much of the man-made foods they've got sugar, they've got salt, they've got oil, they've got fat, unhealthy fat in it, because we do need fat. But I would say stick to as close of a whole food plant-based diet as possible. And one thing I want to clarify, I was thinking about this on my morning walk, is there's a difference between vegan and there's a difference between plant-based. And I hear a lot of experts within the carnivore movement talk about the vegan diet. There's no such thing as a vegan diet. There's a plant-based diet. Vegan is a philosophy. It's about doing as little harm to animals and the environment as possible, but primarily animals. And a lot of times they demonize veganism as if it is a diet, and people can wrap their hands around that. But when you say veganism is really about the animals, it's hard for people to argue with that.
It's funny because I know people who love their dogs and cats, as I do, and we got 4 of each. And I know you got a menagerie.
We've got a few animals.
Which I will ask you about that. But along that line, I'll go into somebody's home, for example, and I think, boy, you love Fido, or the kitty sitting on the kitchen table. He's obviously part of the family, which doesn't bother me at all, obviously. Some people it does. And then I'll think, and then you pull out like a ham or a turkey or a cold cut. Not to mention that, forget that, let's not even talk about the health consequences for a second, but the humanity of what's happened to that,
Right.
that you love your cat, you love your dog, but you don't relate the fact that the pig had a mom, the chicken has a mom and a dad. And these other species that and then somebody said to me a few weeks ago, well, you're like a speciesist. I said, no, I'm not. I just don't like to cause harm to other living creatures, pain, So just your thoughts on that to just help our non-vegan friends understand what actually happens to some of these animals and the cruelty that happens to them at the finality of their lives.
John, I would say that's cognitive dissonance at its best because a lot of people they've heard, but they choose to ignore it. It's if you watch the news all the time, you start believing everything in the world is bad. It's just, that's the way it is. If you hang out with a lot of positive people who are doing good things in their life, they're doing service work, you believe that there's a lot of people doing service work. And for many people, they choose not to expose themselves to the truth because if they see the truth over and over again, they probably are going to have to do something about it. And it is that separation of this is my dog or my cat, or in our case, we have horses, we have chickens, we have a rooster, we have a couple of dogs. We had a cat until a few months ago who went over the Rainbow Bridge, but we have all rescues. And it's so interesting because I worked in the pet industry for a period of years, and it was a little rescue dog that was my entree into that industry. I did a crowdfunding for Delaney. She was a backyard puppy mill dog, about 10 years old, had tumors all over, rotted out teeth. She was a mess. And turns out that at 10 years old, she had great blood work. So we needed to do some surgery on her to give her a quality of life. And somebody from the pet industry who had been following me contacted me and said, can you come speak at this conference? One thing led to another. And then for about 3 or 4 years, I worked primarily in the pet industry. And what shocked me most of all were the number of people who were pet boarders. They had pet supply companies, they were groomers, whatever it may be, and yet they ate animals. And I remember I'm on the platform speaking and I'm looking at the lunch plates and I'm seeing steak, I'm seeing salmon, I'm seeing chicken. And I was still carnivore at that time. Who am I to talk? So I'm rescuing animals on the one hand and eating them on the other. And I remember looking out and something clicked in that moment. It was like, this doesn't make sense. And I think that was one of the first aha moments I had. So I think for a lot of people, it is that cognitive dissonance of my dog is my family member, my pet, but the cow, we don't think about that.
Yep.
And so I think the more that people can put the blinders on, the more they're able to continue those type of behaviors. And again, this is not a judgment because I was 64 when I went vegan. So who am I to say that somebody in their 20s should be vegan? But I think a lot of younger people are much more aware than older people are.
And I share that, by the way. I make no judgment on people. My own wife still eats meat occasionally,
Mm-hmm.
not every day. She knows she shouldn't, but she hasn't made the commitment yet. So I don't judge anybody. I just try to educate them a little bit on there is a different way. Just try it. You know what? And like you said, 7 days with you. With me, it was 1 day. It was like, okay, hey, look, if I'm starving to death tomorrow, I'm going to go eat. I'm going to McDonald's. And it was like, oh, wait, I'm not starving to death. I'm actually feeling good. Wow. Maybe
Interesting.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and gee, my arteries feel better too, which I wasn't even worried about them at that point. But let's stay on you because let's stay on the animals for a minute. Tell us about your rescue program.
Actually, it's not a program. It's just kind of like I have the experience that we live out in a rural community in Oregon. We have 5 acres and we're in an area where people tend to dump animals. It's just, that's a fact of life. And also people know that we do rescue. Recently, we fostered 3 kittens that were about 4 weeks old. Their mother had abandoned them. And they said, can you please take these kittens and nurture them for a while, and then we'll find homes for them. We found 3 great homes. But I've had people ask about my sanctuary. Can I come and see your sanctuary? It's no, these are our family members, and it's not open to the public. But we've got 3 horses. One, we've had him since he was day 1 because the neighbor next door was fostering the mother who came out of a rescue where there were 110 horses that were left. They were abandoned. It was a few years ago, probably, I think 16 years ago, when there was a lot of trade going down to Mexico with horses in particular. They were abandoned in the desert, in the high desert in Oregon. 60 of them were already dead, and the other 40 or 50, they needed to be taken care of. Our neighbor took one of them. Turns out the mare was pregnant. Nobody knew that at the time. And when Dustin was born, the neighbor named him Dustin. When he was born, we're like, we've got room, let's take him. So most of our animals have come to us by way of just showing up on our property. Delaney, she showed up on our property, and how she got there is beyond me. She was the little Shih Tzu dog that got me in the pet industry. She could hardly walk. Her hip had been broken and never been healed properly. She couldn't see very well. She had rotted out teeth. She had tumors all over her belly, and she literally crawled onto the property. And it was just like, okay, you're home. You're home. And there was there's a lot of feral cats in the area. There was one that came to our walkway yesterday, and we put food and water out for it, and it was very timid. And this morning the food and water was still there. So it was like, okay, obviously you have somewhere else you can go for food, but we were willing to take the cat in if he or she needed a home. So that's how we come into our animals. And once they're here for life. And with a dog, you can figure 10, 15, 20 years max. With horses, you're looking at sometimes up to 40 years, where that's a lifelong, it's like longer than most marriages last.
I know, like parakeets, for example, if you're over a certain age, I don't think they'll sell you a parakeet because they live 50 years.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're like our age, forget it. They're not, but I eat still, sir. We're not going to sell
you. Yeah.
Let's talk about growing a vegan business.
What would you like to know?
You have an expertise in it. If anyone is interested, we're going to go through how to get in touch with you at the end and all that. What would be the steps if they said, you know what, I'm committed to this lifestyle? You got to be committed to this lifestyle, by the way. Otherwise, people will know you're not in about 2 seconds.
Right.
But we have people that listen. We got thousands of people that listen. If somebody says, you know what, I'm thinking of a business change and like the lifestyle, committed to it and philosophically, what are some of the steps?
The first step would be reach out to me and let me know that you'd like to have a conversation, because I was actually talking to a group of people earlier today. In the beginning, when I started my business 31 years ago, I think it was 1994 that I started my business. If somebody could fog a mirror and they could pay my fee, they were a client. Nowadays, it's a lot different. I think we get really defined in what we're doing. But mostly what I look for are people that do have business experience. And my areas that I really focus on now is if they want to start a podcast, if they want to write a book, and I have companies that I refer them over to, but if they want to promote the book and use the book to grow their business. So I have very specific lanes that I work in. But the first part would be to have a conversation with me, because 9 times out of 10, I may not be a fit for them, and I can recommend somebody who is. If you're looking for somebody to give you nutrition information, that's not me. I can talk about it, but that's not what I coach people on. And I don't consider myself a coach. I am a consultant. So I can go into an organization and I can help them fix certain things that they have problems with or they need help with. One of my clients was the National Health Association, longest running plant-based organization in the world. And they started in 1948, I believe it was. And I helped them get their podcast off the ground. And we got some good traction with that podcast. So I work with organizations, I work with individuals, I work with companies that want that visibility. Maybe they want to use a book to get the visibility, they want to get on podcast shows, or they want to start a podcast.
Great. And at the end, we'll get through how to get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
But I have a couple other questions. One of which is about our friends in the medical profession. And we were talking about this off camera. And love your thoughts on how some of our friends that have MD after their name have come over to a new way of thinking because they see a lot. But I love your thoughts because you work with doctors, you know a lot of doctors. And what do you think that's happening? Because there seems like there's a metamorphosis with these people of we want to know more. We want to know what Michael Greger or Campbell or Esselstyn or Dean Ornish or some of these other luminaries on our side of the fence, what they're talking about.
One thing that from the people that I know, quite a few of the docs in the plant-based space, one thing I know to be true is in medical school, most students do not get very much nutritional training. And if they're taught nutrition, it often includes eating meat or drinking milk. And it could be part of that is funded by the meat and dairy industry. But I do know a lot of people, once they, if you will, see the light, They realize they can't keep practicing the way they have been. And many go into lifestyle medicine. Many of them open up a boutique practice. But I also know in talking to doctors who have not become plant-based, but they're within the system, they feel really stuck. My own doctor, who I had for 17 years, and due to Medicare and insurance changes and all that, I was considered a new patient for her, and I called to make an appointment, and they go, "Oh, you didn't see her during COVID, so you're a new patient." And I said, "I saw her for 17 years. They said, we're not taking new patients." And it's like, "What?" And I said, "Can I talk to her?" Because we had a great relationship. And they said, "Oh, no, she has nothing to do with it." But I do recall the last time I saw her a few years ago. I was in for my annual checkup, and she was almost in tears. And I said, "Dr. Miller, what's going on?" And she said, "I don't know how much longer I can take it here." And the organization she was with sold to another organization. I think it was United Healthcare. And I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "It's a churn and burn." She goes, "We come in, we can spend 10 or 15 minutes with you. We go on to the next patient." She goes, "By the end of the day, I'm totally exhausted." And I, of course, tongue in cheek, I said, "You might want to go plant-based. That might help." And I was serious about it. But I've talked to quite a few doctors who have had that feeling of being trapped. And a physician assistant who actually is very well known in the Eugene market, Lane County, as being a plant-based expert. He and I worked on Vegan Fest a few months ago. It was run by somebody else, but we were volunteers. And he said that he had left that particular medical group because basically when it was bought out by the other organization, they were teaching them how to get people on more medication, more surgeries, more money-making propositions. And he said, "I just can't do it. It doesn't align with my ethics." And so I think that a lot of people feel very trapped, just like people that are carnivore and they haven't been educated on what they could do to turn their health around. So they feel trapped and they're miserable. Then there's another group of people that they're frightened to take the risk, and yet they're taking the risk of moving into a whole different type of practice. And many are doing quite well as a result of it. But what it really all boils down to, John, is they have to know how to market themselves. Really, if you're going to go into a boutique practice, there's a whole different conversation that you need to have around how you reach your market. But I know that it was during COVID, I had switched insurance companies because with Medicare, every year they try to get you to go to one company or the other. And I'm at a meeting, an insurance company meeting, and they're talking about prescription drugs. And this woman next to me, she goes, "Yeah, I'm on 23 medications." I said, "23?" She goes, "Yeah." And the woman next to me on the other side, "Yeah, I take 7 or 8 or whatever it was." And I said, 7 or 8? And they said, "How many are you on?" I said, "None." And they said, "What?" I said, "None." And they said, "How is that possible?" And I said, "Do you really want to know?" I always want to ask that question before I start spewing this plant-based stuff. And they're like, "Yeah, I want to know." I told them I was plant-based. I don't eat any meat or dairy. You would have thought that I came in with a gun. They just shut down. They didn't want to talk to me. It was like, "Oh, okay." And that was it. They didn't ask any questions. It was quite telling. So for them, it was easier to take the drugs because that's what they were familiar with than to stretch themselves. And I can relate it to being in recovery. When I stopped drinking, it was a whole lifestyle change. I had to change everything. I had to change where I hung out, who I hung out with, what I did with my time. And there were times I just didn't know what to do with my time. So I would go to somebody who was older and wiser with time in the program, and they would literally tell me what to do. "Okay, what you're going to do right now is you're going to read page 28 out of the big book." It's like, "Why?" Don't ask why, just do it. And I would do it, and it's, "Oh, okay, now I feel better." So it's the same thing with going plant-based. A lot of people just don't know what they don't know, and it's unfamiliar.
You're making a great point too, because at every aspect in life, not just nutrition, but everything, we need mentors and role models. And like I met this guy, Fran Turk, who's a lot younger. He's in his 30s. And he and his wife, who's also Kathleen, by the way, they've been doing this for a number of years. They worked in Costa Rica together years ago at the fasting center down there. And that's how they met and fell in love. She was sick. She was actually a patient. And then she got into it, into the lifestyle. But if I started vegetarian on my own, was a junk vegetarian, then gravitated towards playing with veganism, met Fran by accident on the internet, And all of a sudden I had a coach. And I had
Right.
somebody to say, this is why we do what we do. And I never heard of
Right.
things like mucoid plaque and all that, which we won't get into today for the sake of our audience. It isn't vegan. But when I started to understand some of those concepts from somebody who knew what they were talking about, it was like, wow, why isn't everybody doing this? Why do I go in the food store and see some of this junk sold? But it leads me to my next question. Do you think now with Bobby Kennedy having a significant voice, not just for himself, but for people like us and other people, even people who are more into their health that want health options, that in some cases were taken away from them during COVID, frankly. Okay, that now that we have a voice, we have somebody down there who can, by the way, knock out 100 push-ups, which the last person running our health department, I don't think could spell push-ups. But here you have a guy who's a beast, 78-plus-year-old man. But anyway, Bobby Kennedy aside, do you think that we're starting to see a shift? Okay, not just in the medical profession, but overall, where people are starting to say, hey, my health is my responsibility. I'm going to be the first decision maker. Sure, I'm going to seek my doctor's opinion, my chiropractor's opinion, my naturopath's opinion, my whoever in the medical profession. Of course, I'm going to seek their wisdom. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be the ultimate decision maker, as opposed to just having this blind faith of saying, give me this pill or
Right.
this shot, and then finding out afterwards that it may not necessarily have been in your best interest to take that.
John, that is another great question. And yes, I do. I think that more and more people are realizing, because I've noticed on Good Morning America, they're doing segments now on whole food, plant-based eating. More every day, we're seeing things that tie into, now that could be the algorithms, of course, because depending on what your search history is and all that. But I think more people are being exposed to the fact that whole food, plant-based is the way to go. And just the other day on News Nation, I saw Dr. Mark Hyman, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've been listening to him for years.
Yeah, you do.
And he's not 100% vegan. He does consume, I think, dairy occasionally, like goat's milk or something, but he really advocates for a whole food, plant-based diet. And I think that the more people realize that it's not as difficult as they're being led to believe. And when I first went plant-based, and I went to see my doctor and I told her that I've gone plant-based because my stats were great. She goes, whatever you're doing, keep doing. She didn't even recognize me when she walked into the exam room. She goes, Kathleen, because I had dropped like 60 pounds. And I said, yep. And she goes, oh my gosh. She goes, you're looking so great. And she goes, your test results are amazing. What are you doing? I said, I'm plant-based. She goes, I want you to meet Scott Wagnon. He was the physician assistant. And I met him. He had free classes he was doing. It was 13 weeks, 12 or 13 weeks of classes in the evening. You didn't have to pay for it. It was all about how to start a whole food plant-based diet. So I went in there and I made sure to introduce myself to him and every other doctor that he had there, every other expert. And basically they took me under their wing and they helped me to get on track. So I think a lot of times people have a fear of the unknown. They have a fear of being judged. But once they realize that it's becoming normal, it's becoming more normalized, and that you're not going to be ostracized. And it's also in the language patterns, because I know when I go to a restaurant, if I say that, do you have any plant-based choices? Sometimes people get a little, I said, I have a heart condition. My heart condition is it breaks my heart for animals to be killed for food. I don't tell them that, but that's my heart condition. And the minute you say that, they're all, oh yeah, we've got this and this. But if I was to say, I'm vegan and I need vegan choices, that attitude already puts somebody on the defensive. So I think with a lot of what's going on, I think that in the vegan community, some people need to have different language patterns in the way they approach it. Don't go in so defensive and assume that people are not going to like you. Because honestly, in the time that I've been plant-based and vegan, I've had very few people give me any kind of pushback or go, oh, that's really strange. Now, we do have a handyman, and he is a milk drinker and a bacon eater and all that. And he was making jokes for a while. And I said, John, his name is John too. John, I really need you to know that hurts me. Please don't do that. And it took a couple of times, and I finally said, John, I'm serious. I don't like those jokes. And he was cool about it. Yeah. But he didn't realize why I'm so committed. I think a part of it is that people are taking their health into their own hands. But another part, again, we become jaded by what we know and the people we hang out with. But you go out into society, and I would say we're still on an uphill climb.
Do you think that, and this is one of the challenges of this lifestyle, not necessarily for people like you and I that are a little bit older and we've made good money in our lives, but for some of the younger people without raising families. You go to McDonald's or Wendy's or one of the burger places and you can feed your family for, I don't know, 20 bucks, right? And like I went into Sprouts the other day, I walked out, I had 3 melons, a watermelon, some avocados, a couple other little things, some tofu, I forget what else. Not a lot. 3 bags of groceries. And it was like $44. And it's okay. Eating healthy is expensive. I can afford it. And even if I couldn't afford it, I'd give up other things to afford it because now I understand the value. But getting started sometimes, what would be your suggestion for that young mom? Maybe then she goes, God, I want my kids to really eat fruits and vegetables. But wow, it costs more. And I got 3 kids. So how do I?
And in many ways, that's the lie we've been told. Because, for example, for dinner tonight, I have spaghetti that I did a batch of spaghetti, and it's vegan, obviously. And I use a rice pasta, and I froze half of it, pulled it out of the freezer. It's done. And I think the whole batch probably cost for everything like $5. That was it. And that was 2 meals. I think part of it is for people and it can be a real challenge, especially for young parents. I get that. If they can find support groups in their local area, because I know there are plant-based organizations that are working with young adults who have young children and teaching them how to batch cook so that they can save time, they can save money if you shop in the bulk section, because we have become such a convenient society. It's grab a bag of this, grab a can of that, and you're good to go. Rather going back to the whole thing of eating meals at the dinner table. On one podcast I was listening to this morning, they were talking about the number of meals that people eat out. And I rarely eat out anymore because I enjoy cooking my own meals. It's not cost effective. And I had the same thought as you when I go grocery shopping and I walk out with a $200 bill. I'm going, blessings. I'm blessed. I can afford this. And then I think about those people that can't afford it. And yet, with a slight change, and I think it was Dr. Mark Hyman that was talking about a family he worked with in South Carolina for the movie Fed Up. And he said when he went to their house, all of them were unhealthy. Even the young 10-year-old boy was already type 2 diabetic, was on his way to kidney failure, a whole bunch of stuff going on. And he looked in their cabinets, it was all processed food, ultra processed foods. Yeah. And he taught them, the mother never learned how to cook. He taught her how to chop food. They didn't even have a chopping board. They didn't have knives to cut meat or cut vegetables with. So he went out and bought this for her and taught them some simple things with cooking that was so cost effective, and their grocery bill went down. And they got healthier. I forget how much it was. They lost like 100 pounds in the first couple of months, the whole family, between all of them. And the one young kid, he dropped like 50 pounds, gained it back when he worked at a restaurant. And then he ended up losing 130 pounds and was really healthy and now is a doctor. And there was a great story to it. But the part of the challenge is people don't know what to do. A lot of young women and young men are not taught how to cook. And it's not just a woman's responsibility. With a couple, the man can cook too. And oftentimes men find that they enjoy cooking. What I like to do when I cook is I think of the love I'm putting into the food, and I think of where the food came from. And I don't have to feel guilty that anything was sacrificed unnecessarily for my meal.
That's why with having a wife that still eats meat, that's partly why I went raw, was the fact that it's like raw. I don't have to do anything. I just buy it. I come at home, I cut it in half, I eat it. And I'm being somewhat facetious, but there's some truth. We don't fight over who's going to do the grocery shopping. I'm a man that loves to grocery shop. If I can be in Sprouts or Whole Foods or a farmer's market, like in my element, it's like, what do you have here today that you don't normally have? Anyway, so Kathleen, just in wrapping up, because you and I could probably talk for hours. And
absolutely.
We do want our listeners to take action. So how do they get in touch with you if they want to?
Best way would be to go to veganvisibility.com or just Google me, Kathleen Gage, and you'll find plenty of information of what I do. And I'd love to hear from people. If there's anybody out there that seriously, if you want insights ongoing plant-based, I'm happy to have conversations. That's not what I do in my business. So I have a passion for that. But social media, I'm all over the place.
Thank you for doing that, and thank you for being you, and thank you for being one of the many leaders in this movement, so to speak. And it is a movement. I've seen
Yes, it is.
like you have over these years that when I first went veg, going from being a guy that used to go to an all-you-can-eat place that Randy White from the Dallas Cowboys and his brother-in-law owned in McKinney, Texas, okay, going to a guy that all of a sudden started eating different. I took some flack. There were some guys who made fun. There's still guys who make fun of me, by the way. I go, okay, let's do this, guys. Who wants to go get their cholesterol taken?
Absolutely.
And it's like,
absolutely.
then they're looking at their shoes. And you know what? I don't do that to be sarcastic or nasty. I do that to make a point. It's, look, if you want to be healthy, Jay Cordich said, you got a choice, sickness or health. Plain and simple, right? And so I don't normally do this on this show, Kathleen, but just to close, because this has been a unique show, it's been a different show, and I've enjoyed it. Just folks, and I'll let you close it out, Kathleen, with your statement on this, but let me just encourage all of you. Try this lifestyle. You don't have to jump in raw vegan day one, or vegan for that matter. You can take it in baby steps if you want, like I did. It just worked out that way for me. I had no idea what I was doing. I just said one day, hey, it's a Friday night. On Saturday, I'm not going to eat meat. And all of a sudden I felt better on Sunday morning. I was like, okay, on Sunday, I might as well do the same thing. I didn't starve to death, obviously. Still 242 pounds. Okay. Still bench pressing over 400, by the way. Okay. At 64 years old. So I'm not like a weakling. I didn't blow away in the wind. It's like I'm still a big, strong man. Okay. And by the way, so are people like Mike Womack. Okay. One of the top bench pressers in the world, over 1,000-pound bench, who's vegetarian. Okay. And there's certainly others that we could get into. But my point is this. Give yourself a chance with this lifestyle. You're going to find, like Kathleen did, like I did, like so many others, that it agrees with you. You give it a chance. And by the way, you may fall backwards at some point. It doesn't make you a bad person. Okay. If you fall off the proverbial wagon, you can get back on the next day or the next meal. So anyway, that's my advice, Kathleen. I don't normally do that, but I feel so strongly about our subject today. I just wanted to encourage people, give it a shot. Your thoughts?
I really appreciate that you said that, John, because the older I get, the more I realize I have less years in front of me than I have behind me. And I want those years to be really quality. And we can have a quality of life, regardless of where you're at in life right now. You can make a change today that changes the whole trajectory of your life. And as I was listening to another podcast recently, the woman was talking about somebody in their 70s being able to carry groceries from their car to their house. And I'm like, that's a given, but it's not. For a lot of people, it's not a given. They struggle. And you can either struggle in life or you can make choices today that will give you the ability to have a better quality of life. And will it be easy? Not necessarily. Any change that you make is not going to necessarily be easy, but will it be worth it? Absolutely. Because at my age, to go into the gym and be able to do a good workout. I had a gentleman yesterday, and I tend to attract the 80 and 90-year-old men. They seem to have no filters, and they're like, hey, I want to talk to her. And so I'm doing the track, and I'm just like, I'm walking at a pretty fast pace, and he stopped me, and he goes, excuse me. And I'm like, what? And I had to take my earbuds out. He goes, what? I said, what? And he goes, I saw you yesterday. And he goes, you're a machine. And I just smiled because I thought, oh my gosh, I was just off in my own little world, not even thinking about it. But I am a machine that has made choices that has given me a quality of life. Because I got to tell you, John, if I ever have a situation in life where my health is taken from me, I want to live with no regrets. If something happens and I am confined to this body for whatever reason, I want to be able to say, I gave it everything. I didn't cause this without really thinking consciously about the choices I made. So I encourage people, really look at what you're doing on a daily basis and think about what's the quality of life you want and why do you want that? Is it for you? Is it for your children? Is it for your grandchildren? Is it so you can do service in your community, in your church, wherever it may be? But you owe it to yourself to live the quality of life that you deserve. It's your birthright. So with that, John, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check back weekly for more exciting episodes. And don't miss Ink and Insight every Wednesday, where we celebrate iconic authors and dive into their impactful works.